I never thought I'd see him again. Not after what he did. Not after the way I walked away from him, from us, from the life we had built together. Not after I spent 3 years erasing him from my heart. But there he was, standing at my doorstep, like a ghost from the past that refused to stay buried. The air outside was heavy, thick with the tension that settled between us. He wasn't the same man I had left behind. The sharp confidence in his stance was gone. The arrogance in his expression had been replaced with something desperate. His suit was slightly wrinkled, his tie loosened as if he hadn't slept in days. And when his eyes met mine, I saw it, the realization, the regret, the undeniable truth that he had spent 3 years searching for something that no longer belonged to him. I swallowed down the emotions rising in my throat and kept my voice calm, controlled, unshaken. "What are you doing here?" He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I needed to see you." My fingers curled around the edge of the doorframe. I should have shut the door in his face, should have walked away without a second thought. But instead, I stood there, because some part of me wanted him to hear the truth from my lips. I tilted my head slightly, watching him. "You've already seen me." His jaw clenched. "That's not what I meant." I let out a quiet sigh, shifting my weight. 3 years, I said softly. "It's been 3 years and now you show up?" He swallowed hard. "I tried to find you." I held up a hand, cutting him off. "Don't lie," I whispered, because if he had truly wanted to find me back then, he would have. The silence between us stretched, heavy and suffocating. And then he said the words that made my heart stop. "I still love you." A sharp laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. "Love?" I echoed, shaking my head. "You don't get to say that now." His hands clenched into fists. "I made a mistake," he said, his voice thick with regret. I stared at him, my pulse steady, my voice calm, almost amused. "Yes," I murmured. "You did." And then, before he could speak again, I shattered him completely. "I'm married." I watched as the color drained from his face, as the confidence faded into shock, as his lips parted, like he wanted to say something, but the words refused to come. For 3 years he had probably imagined this moment. Imagine me still waiting for him. Imagine me still longing for the love he threw away. But now he was standing in front of a woman who no longer belonged to him. And he couldn't handle it. His voice was hoarse when he finally spoke. "You're lying." I lifted a brow, crossing my arms over my chest. "Why would I lie?" His jaw tightened. "Because you wouldn't just move on." I smiled. Soft, cold, unforgiving. "Why wouldn't I?" I whispered. "Did you think I would wait forever?" He took a step closer, his breathing unsteady. "Who is he?" he demanded. I tilted my head. "Why does that matter?" His entire body tensed. "Because," he said slowly, his voice thick with something dark, something almost dangerous. "You were mine before him." A chill ran down my spine, but I refused to let it show. I let out a soft, quiet sigh. "No," I said, voice unwavering. "I was never yours." His hands curled into fists at his sides. "That's not true." I shrugged. "It is now." His breathing was sharp, uneven, like he was barely holding himself together, like something inside him was unraveling. And that's when I saw it. The obsession, the realization that he had lost me, and the terrifying understanding that he wasn't ready to accept it. I took a step back, gripping the door handle. "I think you should go." His eyes darkened. "No." My heart skipped a beat. "What?" "I'm not leaving," he said, his voice eerily calm. "Not until we fix this." The way he said it, fix this, sent a chill down my spine, because there was nothing to fix. I had moved on. I had a new life, a new future, and yet, he still thought he had a say in it. I exhaled sharply, gripping the door tighter. "There's nothing to fix," I said, my voice firm. His jaw clenched. "Yes, there is." I forced a laugh. "So what now? You're just going to stand here until I magically change my mind?" He took another step forward, closing the distance between us. "If that's what it takes." That's when I realized this wasn't just a reunion. This wasn't just a man dealing with heartbreak. This was something far, far worse. He wasn't here because he missed me. He was here because he thought I still belonged to him. And now that I had moved on, he was losing control. I took a steady breath, keeping my expression calm, unreadable. You don't have a say in my life anymore. His fingers twitched. You think that? I nodded. I know that. He swallowed hard. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said the words that sent ice through my veins. If I can't have you, then no one can. The world stood still. The air grew heavier. I felt my fingers go numb around the door handle, my mind racing. This wasn't love. This was possession. This was obsession. And now, I was in danger. I forced my lips into a tight, controlled smile. Leave, I said, my voice sharper than before. Now. He took another step closer. And that's when I heard it. A familiar voice. Firm. Strong. Protective. What's going on here? My heart slammed against my ribs as I turned, and there he was. My husband. Standing tall. Looking at my ex like he was already deciding whether to throw him out himself. And my ex? His entire body froze. I could almost hear his thoughts. The man he had abandoned was now replaced. The woman he had taken for granted now belonged to someone else. And suddenly the truth was undeniable. I was never his. And now? I never would be. The room was charged with tension. For a moment no one moved. My ex stood frozen. His eyes locked onto the man who had just entered. My husband. The man who had taken the place he thought would always be his. And I stood between them, watching the moment my past and present collided. My husband's voice was firm, controlled. What's going on here? He wasn't asking me. His gaze was fixed on my ex, assessing him. My ex turned to me, his expression shifting. Anger, disbelief, desperation. Who is he? His voice was low, sharp. Demanding. I didn't hesitate. My husband. I saw it the moment he broke. The moment reality finally crashed over him. The moment he realized I had moved on in ways he never thought possible. His fingers clenched at his sides. His jaw tightened. And then, in a voice thick with something dangerous, he whispered, "You're lying." My husband stepped forward slightly, placing himself between us, his presence solid and unwavering. "She's not lying." His tone was calm, controlled. But beneath the calm I could feel it. The warning. The silent threat. He wasn't just standing in front of me. He was claiming me. And my ex? He couldn't take it. He let out a breathless laugh, shaking his head. "You can't be serious," he muttered. Then his gaze snapped back to mine. "This is a joke, right?" His voice wavered, his confidence cracking. "This isn't real." I met his stare, my expression unreadable. "It is." Something flickered in his eyes. Something dark. Something that made my stomach twist. "You were mine before him." His voice was no longer desperate. It was dangerous. You don't just stop loving someone like that. My throat tightened, but I refused to back down. I did. He took a step forward, but my husband moved instantly. A single step blocking his path. The message was clear. Not one step closer. The tension spiked. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. For a second I thought my ex would do something, say something, act on his anger. But then, he laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was something else entirely. Something that sent a chill down my spine. He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "This isn't over." His voice was lower now. Calm. Too calm. Then he looked at my husband. "You think you've won?" My husband didn't even blink. "You think she's yours now?" His lips curled into a twisted smirk. "Love like ours doesn't just disappear." His eyes flicked back to me. "You'll see." And then, before anyone could say another word, he walked away. But I knew. This wasn't over. That night I couldn't sleep. Even with my husband beside me, even with his warmth and security, I could still feel the ghost of my past lingering in the air. I could still hear those words. "You'll see." I should have felt safe. I should have felt relieved. But instead, I felt watched. Like he wasn't really gone. Like he was waiting for something. Like he was planning his next move. And I was right. Because the next morning, the first message arrived. It was short, simple, a single sentence that sent a shiver through my bones. Does he love you more than I did? I deleted it immediately. I told myself not to respond, told myself not to give him the reaction he wanted. But then another message came. Then another. Then another. Each one worse than the last. Do you think he really knows you? Do you miss me yet? You can pretend, but I know the truth. And the last one. If I can't have you, no one can. I gripped my phone, my hands shaking. This wasn't just a man dealing with heartbreak. This was a man who had lost control. A man who wasn't going to stop. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt real fear. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at my screen, my heart pounding. Then, without thinking, I blocked his number. I turned off my phone, took a deep breath, tried to push away the rising panic. But deep down I knew. This wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. I didn't tell my husband. Not yet. Because part of me still hoped that if I ignored him, he would go away. That if I didn't react, he would finally let go. But then, a package arrived. A small black box. No return address. I hesitated, staring at it for a long moment before finally opening the lid. Inside, nestled between soft velvet, was my old engagement ring. The one I had thrown away. The one I thought I had left behind forever. And beneath it, a small note. You belong to me. My stomach twisted. This wasn't about love anymore. This was about control. This was about obsession. And now I was in real danger. I should have told my husband. The moment I saw the ring, the moment I read that note, I should have walked straight to him and told him everything. But instead I stayed silent. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't want him to worry. Didn't want him to think I was weak. Didn't want him to know that deep down, I was afraid. I placed the ring back in the box, snapped the lid shut, and locked it away. If I ignored it, maybe he would stop. Maybe he would finally let me go. But the next morning, another package arrived. This time there was no ring, no note, just a single photograph of me, taken from a distance. At the cafe I had been at yesterday, he was watching me. My stomach twisted. I gripped the edge of the counter, my breath unsteady. This wasn't a coincidence. He wasn't just sending messages anymore. He wasn't just reminiscing about the past. He was here, close, watching, waiting. And I had no idea when he would make his next move. I swallowed hard, forcing my hands to steady as I reached for my phone. This time I didn't hesitate. I called my husband. He picked up on the first ring. Hey. His voice was warm, comforting. Everything okay? I hesitated for only a second before exhaling slowly. No, I said softly. We need to talk. When he came home that evening, I showed him everything. The messages, the ring, the photograph. I expected anger, expected rage. But what I saw on his face was something even more terrifying. Cold, calculated, like a man who had already decided exactly what he was going to do. He turned to me, voice calm but sharp. This ends now. I frowned. What do you mean? His eyes met mine. I'm going to handle this. I grabbed his arm. No, I said quickly. You don't know what he's capable of. His jaw tightened. Neither does he. I shook my head, my heart pounding. You don't understand, I whispered. He's not the same person I knew. I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. He's obsessed. My husband exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. Then he reached for my hands, his grip steady, strong. You are my wife, he said quietly. And no one gets to make you feel unsafe. No one. His voice dropped even lower. Especially not him. That night my husband made a call. I didn't know who it was to. Didn't ask. But the next morning everything changed. When I stepped outside I felt it instantly. I was being watched. But this time it wasn't just by him. There were other eyes on me now. My husband had put security in place. And when my ex tried to follow me, he realized too late that he wasn't the only one playing this game anymore. His next move was reckless. Desperate. That evening he showed up. Not at my home. Not at my office. At the restaurant where I was having dinner with my husband. He walked straight to our table. And for the first time he didn't hide his madness anymore. Tell me. he said, his voice thick with rage. Do you love him? I didn't blink. Yes. His breath hitched. His hands curled into fists. My husband placed his glass down slowly, watching him carefully. You need to leave. My ex ignored him. His eyes were locked on me. Like I was the only thing keeping him standing. Like if I said the wrong thing, he would break completely. His voice shook. You think you're safe with him? I inhaled sharply. I know I am. For a moment he said nothing. Just stood there, breathing heavily, trying to hold himself together. Then he whispered something that sent ice through my veins. If I can't have you, no one will. And then he walked away. But I knew this wasn't over. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. The way he looked at me. The way his hands had shaken with rage. The way his voice had cracked when he realized I would never be his again. He was losing control. And I had no idea what he would do next. My husband noticed. He pulled me close, his voice firm. I won't let him hurt you. I buried my face in his chest, exhaling shakily. I know. But deep down, I was terrified. Because my ex had just made his final threat. And soon I would find out just how far he was willing to go. I could still hear his voice. If I can't have you, no one will. Those words stayed with me, circling my mind, poisoning my thoughts. This wasn't love. This wasn't heartbreak. This was something far more dangerous. And now I wasn't just trying to move on. I was trying to survive. The next morning, my husband increased security. Guards at the house. A car following me to work. A constant presence of protection. But even then I could feel it. That he was watching. That he was waiting. For what I didn't know. And that was the scariest part. I tried to continue my life. Tried to go to work. Tried to act like everything was fine. But I wasn't fine. I was constantly looking over my shoulder. Checking my phone. Avoiding dark parking lots. Because I knew. He wasn't done. The next message came 2 nights later. It was simple. But it sent ice through my veins. I miss you. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around my phone. Blocked. Deleted. Erased. But I knew it wouldn't stop him. It never did. The next morning I walked outside to find my car covered in roses. Not just a bouquet. Not just a few scattered petals. Hundreds of roses. Blood red. Drenched in a twisted version of love. I stepped back, my breath catching in my throat. A small card was tucked between the flowers. I didn't have to read it. I already knew who it was from. My husband was furious. He ordered a full security sweep. Checked every camera, every entrance, every single weakness. And still there was nothing.
No footy.
No evidence. Like my ex was a ghost. A shadow that slipped through the cracks. And that's when I realized. He was closer than I thought. I stayed inside the house that night. Locked doors. Security in place. My husband beside me, reassuring me that everything would be okay. But I knew better. Because at exactly 3 a.m. my phone buzzed. A message. No words. Just a picture. A photo of me. Taken from outside my bedroom window. I dropped the phone. My pulse roared in my ears. I spun toward the window, heart pounding, but there was nothing there. Just darkness. Just shadows. Just the terrifying realization that he had been here. Watching. The next morning we filed a restraining order. The police got involved. Security doubled. But even with all of it, I knew. It wouldn't stop him. Because he didn't just want to see me. He didn't just want to talk. He wanted to own me. And if he couldn't, I had no idea what he would do. That evening I tried to push the fear aside. Tried to live a normal night. Tried to sit with my husband, eat dinner. Pretend that I wasn't constantly looking at the door. Waiting for something to happen. But then, the power cut out. Pitch black. A sharp silence. Then a knock at the door. I froze. My husband stood, reaching for his phone. But before he could dial, a voice. From the other side of the door. Soft.
Familiar.
His. Open the door. My breath caught in my throat. The air was suffocating. My husband stepped forward, his voice low, deadly. You need to leave. Silence. Then, a quiet chuckle. Dark. Amused. You think you can protect her from me? My husband reached for the security panel, but before he could press anything, A loud bang against the door. I gasped, stepping back. Another bang. Then another. Then another. Until I realized he was trying to break in. My husband grabbed my wrist, pulling me back. "Get upstairs," he ordered. But I was frozen. This wasn't happening. This wasn't real. This was just another nightmare. Right? The door cracked. Splintered. And then, before the final blow, sirens. Flashing lights. A voice over a megaphone. "Step away from the door." The pounding stopped. Silence stretched. Then a single sharp breath. Then his voice. Calm. Unbothered. "You called the cops on me?" I stepped forward, my hands shaking. "Yes." His voice darkened. "You shouldn't have done that." And then I heard him walk away. The police searched the area, checked the security footage. But just like before, he was gone. Like a ghost. Like a nightmare that refused to fade. I sat on the edge of the bed, my pulse still unsteady. My husband crouched in front of me, his hands firm over mine. "This ends now," he said. I swallowed hard. "How?" His gaze was ice cold. "I'll make sure of it." I exhaled slowly, nodding. Because I knew this wasn't just a game anymore. This was war. And the next time my ex came back, it would be the last. I didn't sleep that night. Even after the police left. Even after my husband locked every door, checked every window, made sure the house was secure. Even after he held me in his arms and whispered, "I won't let him hurt you." Because I knew this wasn't over. He wasn't done. Not yet. The next morning, my husband took action. Security was increased. A legal team was brought in. Every step was taken to ensure that my ex could never get close to me again. But deep down I knew, papers don't stop obsession. And when a man like him decides that he owns you, a piece of paper means nothing. Days passed in silence. But it wasn't peace. It was the calm before the storm. And then it happened. The moment I knew was coming. The moment I had been dreading. He came back. This time he didn't send flowers. Didn't leave messages. Didn't try to break in. He waited for me. In the one place I thought he would never dare to show up. In my workplace. I stepped into the building, my heart stopping the moment I saw him. Standing in the lobby. Hands in his pockets. Expression calm. Relaxed. Like he belonged there. Like he wasn't a man who had tried to break into my home days ago. Like he wasn't a man who had whispered death threats in the dark. The receptionist hesitated before turning to me. "He says he knows you," she said carefully. I swallowed hard, my entire body going cold. "I'll handle it," I murmured. I didn't want a scene. Didn't want people to see the panic in my eyes. So I walked toward him. And when I was close enough, I whispered, "What the hell are you doing here?" His lips curled into a slow, dangerous smile. "Nice to see you too." I clenched my fists. "Leave." He chuckled. "I just wanted to talk." My pulse roared in my ears. "We have nothing to talk about." His smile widened. "Then why are you shaking?" I forced a breath, steadying myself. I refused to let him see the fear. Refused to let him think he had any control over me. "You're pathetic," I whispered. His jaw tightened. His fingers twitched at his sides. I had hit a nerve. Good. I took a slow step forward, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "You were a mistake," I said softly. His breathing hitched. I smiled, cruel, unforgiving. "And you are nothing to me now." For a moment he didn't speak. Didn't move. Then finally, in a voice that sent a shiver through my spine, he whispered, "You'll regret saying that." I swallowed hard, keeping my expression blank. "No," I said. "I won't." He stared at me for a long moment. And then, without another word, he turned and walked away.
No anger. No shouting.
No scene. Just silence. And that was worse. Because I knew. This wasn't over. Not yet. That night, my husband found me sitting by the window, staring out into the dark. He stepped closer, his voice gentle. "What is it?" I exhaled slowly. He came to my office. Silence. Then the sharp shift in his energy. "He what?" I looked up at him. "He's planning something," I whispered. My husband didn't hesitate. "Then we end this. Now." The next day my husband made his own move. A press release was sent out. Legal action was officially filed. My ex's name was attached to a restraining order that would make sure he could never come near me again. It was public. A warning. A statement. And just when I thought this would finally be enough to stop him, it only pushed him further. That night, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing. An unknown number. I let it ring. Then another call. Then another. Then a voicemail. I hesitated before pressing play. And the moment I heard his voice, my stomach twisted. You think a restraining order changes anything? His breath was shaky, uneven. You think a few words on paper are going to keep me away? Silence. Then a quiet, broken chuckle. You don't get it, do you? His voice dropped lower, darker. You were never meant to leave me. A pause. Then, a final whisper that sent chills through my entire body. I'm coming back for you. The phone slipped from my fingers. I stumbled back, my breath shaking. This wasn't love. This wasn't heartbreak. This was a warning. And this time, I knew he meant it. I told my husband everything. Every word. Every breath. Every dark promise hidden between the lines of that voicemail. And his reaction? Calm. Cold. Lethal. This ends tonight, he said. I swallowed hard. How? He met my gaze, his voice like steel. I'm going to make sure he never comes near you again. That night my husband made a call. Not to the police. Not to the lawyers. To someone else. Someone who could fix this problem permanently. And as I sat there, heart racing, mind spinning, I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. This wasn't just about an obsessed ex who wouldn't let go. This was about power, protection, control. And the man I married? He wasn't just going to stop him. He was going to destroy him. The night was silent. Too silent. Like the world itself was waiting for something to happen. Like the air was holding its breath. Like this was the calm before the storm. And I knew, tonight everything would end. One way or another. My husband had been on the phone for hours. Speaking in hushed tones. Speaking to people I had never met. People who didn't deal in legal threats and restraining orders. People who dealt in permanent solutions. And I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, knowing that once this night was over, he would never come near me again. But at what cost? I heard my husband's footsteps before I saw him. Felt the weight of his presence before he spoke. He crouched in front of me, his hands warm over mine, his touch steady. His voice was calm. Controlled. It's handled. I swallowed hard. What does that mean? His thumb brushed over my knuckles. It means you never have to be afraid of him again. I exhaled slowly. I should have felt relief. Should have felt safe. But instead, a part of me still wondered. What would he do? What was his next move? How far was he willing to go for me? And the terrifying part? I knew that if I asked, if I really wanted to know, he would tell me. The hours passed in agonizing silence. The weight of what was coming pressing down on me. And then the phone rang. One call. Two calls. Then another. And finally a single text. It's done. My husband set his phone down. His expression unreadable. I hesitated. Where is he? I whispered. A long pause. Then my husband met my gaze, his voice quiet. Gone. My breath caught in my throat. I searched his face, waiting for more. Waiting for an explanation, a confirmation. But he said nothing. Because some things didn't need to be said. I felt the weight lift from my chest. The fear. The paranoia. The constant feeling that I was being watched, followed, hunted. It was gone. For the first time in 3 years, I was free. That night I sat on the balcony, staring out at the city, breathing in the crisp air, breathing in my own safety. No more threats. No more shadows. No more ghosts of the past haunting me. Because he was gone. And he was never coming back. My husband joined me, standing beside me, his warmth grounding me. Do you regret it? He asked quietly. I turned to him, frowning. Regret what? His expression was unreadable. The fact that it ended like this. I exhaled slowly, looking back at the skyline. And then I whispered. No. Because the truth was, some love stories aren't meant to have happy endings. Some people don't know how to let go. And some obsessions need to be erased permanently. He reached for my hand, his fingers lacing with mine. "You're safe now," he murmured. I squeezed his hand. "I know. For the first time in forever. I truly did. For the first time in years I woke up without fear.
No lingering anxiety.
No looking over my shoulder. No dread creeping into my bones. Because he was gone. And I was finally free. The days passed and the world kept moving. Life didn't stop just because someone had disappeared. And neither did I. I focused on living again. On breathing without feeling like someone was watching. On loving my husband without the past clinging to me like a shadow. And for the first time in forever, it felt real. But closure? Closure is strange. It doesn't come all at once. It doesn't wrap itself neatly with a bow. It comes in small moments. And for me it came in one final unexpected letter. It arrived in the mail with no return address. I almost didn't open it. Almost threw it away without a second glance. But something inside me, a part of me that needed to know, made me tear the envelope open. And when I saw the handwriting, my breath caught. It was from him. There were only a few lines. Short, simple, but they sent a shiver down my spine. "I thought I could control you. I thought you would always be waiting for me. I was wrong. I lost. And now I disappear for good." My hands trembled as I folded the letter, my mind racing. This was it. The final goodbye. Not spoken. Not begged. Not screamed in desperation. Just accepted. He finally understood. He had lost me forever. And there was no coming back from that. I exhaled slowly, my heart steady for the first time in years. This wasn't closure. I had already closed that door. This was confirmation. That he was gone. That he would never come back. That my life was truly my own again. I burned the letter. Watched the flames eat away at the past. At the obsession. At the love that had rotted into something dark and twisted. And when the last piece turned to ash, I walked away without looking back. As I had already won. Years passed. Time moved forward. I moved forward. The scars he left behind faded. The memories became distant. Like an old dream I barely remembered. And him? He became nothing. Not a thought. Not a whisper. Not even a ghost. Just a lesson. A warning. A mistake I would never make again. One night my husband and I walked by the ocean. The waves crashing against the shore. I glanced at him, watching the way the moonlight touched his face. The way he looked at me like I was his entire world. And I knew. This was love. Not obsession. Not control. Not fear disguised as passion. Just love. Safe. Unshaken. Real. He turned to me, his voice soft. "Are you happy?" I smiled, letting the sea breeze fill my lungs. "I am." And for the first time in forever, I truly meant it.